Major funding for this program was provided by Ashland Incorporated, Bank One West Virginia Corporation, Waco Oil and Gas, and West Vaco Corporation. Additional funding was provided by International Hardwoods and Union Carbide Corporation.
Hello, I'm Governor Gaston Caperton, and I'd like to welcome you to a program about a uniquely beautiful state and a uniquely talented group of people. There are many West Virginians who use their leadership, talent, athletic, business, or creative skills to enrich and empower the lives of others. I continue to be inspired by the talented people who call West Virginia home. Our future rests in being able to move new generations of West Virginia and our visitors to even greater achievement. To those, this film is dedicated, a cornerstone for tomorrow.
The mountains stand with a silent and awesome power, surrounding the land, where waters rise up in fury, pounding and raging, while others flow deeply, calmly, shrouded in mystery, through open meadows and lush valleys. These are the mountains of West Virginia. Mountains that protect and isolate. And serve as a mythic backdrop to the people who live here. Mountain men and women who, from the earliest times, have typified the uniquely independent spirit of the land. With names like Cornstalk, Logan, and Princess Aracoma, Anne Bailey, Mary Draper Ingalls, and John Henry, names that symbolize the courage to blaze trails through a wilderness that would later be home for more contemporary explorers, such as Chuck Yeager, fighter pilot, and the first person to fly faster than the speed of sound. Commander John McBride, who piloted the 14th U.S. Space Shuttle. Dr. Colleen Jackson Cook, whose pioneering research led to breakthroughs in the field of genetics. And John Forbes Nash, Jr., who won a Nobel Prize in mathematics for his exploration into the infinite universe of numbers. Many of our country's leaders have emerged from the rugged landscape of West Virginia. From the Civil War strategist, General Thomas Stonewall Jackson, to Booker T. Washington, who rose up from slavery to become one of the leading educators in U.S. history, to Minnie Buckingham Harper, the first woman of African-American descent to become a member of a state legislature. These early West Virginians showed the way for contemporary leaders. Cyrus Vance, Secretary of State and negotiator during the Paris peace talks. Labor leaders Walter Reuther, Arnold Miller, and Cecil Roberts. Rebecca Kane, President of the National League of Women Voters. Ray Ellen McKee, National Teacher of the Year. And a man who, from humble beginnings, became the most influential West Virginian in the history of its statehood, Senator Robert C. Byrd.
Someone just said to me one day, the country needs young men like you in Congress. And said, you're a leader. And I ran for office. And I headed the ticket for the House of Delegates. Raleigh County was entitled to 3 delegates. There were 13 in the race, including 3 incumbents. And I led that ticket. I used my fiddle, took my fiddle, and played tunes. The fiddle opened a lot of doors. I didn't run on the basis that I could play the fiddle, but I got their attention with that fiddle.
Once Byrd captured their attention, voters were quick to realize that the unassuming former butcher from Wolf Creek had an extraordinary leadership ability, along with an unwavering commitment to the people he represented, first in West Virginia, and later in the U.S. House and Senate, where he served as both minority and majority leader.
You're someone who is different, and you've got to believe it. You've got to teach your children that. And I believe it. Well, it's a beautiful state from the standpoint of scenery, its mountains, its hills, its streams, its rivers. I like to think that in the mountains, one is closest to heaven. And we think of our state as almost heaven, West Virginia. No place like it.
West Virginians were pioneers in the world of ideas and images. David Hunter Strother, an illustrator and journalist, was one of the most celebrated writers of the 19th century, with his popular essays for Harper's Magazine. Jim Comstock, a journalistic legend, as a publisher, humorist, and champion of native West Virginia authors, he founded the West Virginia Hillbilly and edited a 51-volume encyclopedia of West Virginia heritage. Today's West Virginia journalists include Charles Peters, editor-in-chief of the Washington Monthly. As film became part of our American culture, a West Virginian named Père Lorenz achieved national prominence as an author, critic, and filmmaker for President Roosevelt during the Depression. Clyde Ware achieved prominence in the realm of screenwriting, Hollywood style, an area in which another West Virginian has risen to the top of his form as a writer of such classics as Raiders of the Lost Ark and director of successful Hollywood films like Body Heat, The Big Chill, and Wyatt Earp.
My brother and I used to play Western out back of our house. It didn't matter that it didn't look like the Wild West. It was a perfect landscape for any kind of imaginary game. I thought it was the most beautiful place I had ever seen, you know. The rolling hills, the ride up there was magnificent. You felt you were going to some sort of heavenly place, you know, high in the mountains. And you could go swimming there, you could play golf, my father did. You could walk around the hills, hike, picnic, snow sled in the winter. It was just heaven to me. And of course, the wildness of the area generally. I mean, every neighborhood was nestled within a woods, you know, a forest, the hills. There was nowhere that you couldn't explore and imagine it to be anything. When people ask me where I'm from, I always say West Virginia. I never will say Florida or Pennsylvania or California. I'm very proud of my connection to West Virginia. It's, you know, it's such a beautiful place. It's so unusual. It's such a mix of real problems and incredible natural beauty. I'm fascinated by the whole place and proud to have sprung from it.
Television is a powerful medium that changed the fabric of our culture. For some talented West Virginians, it's a way of going beyond the mountains to communicate thoughts and ideas. Faith Daniels and Ed Rabel. Tony Brown, host of public television's Tony Brown's Journal.
But what are they doing there different?
It's a
Do they download it?
And John Hendricks, founder of the Discovery Channel and a revolutionary cable television programmer who understood that when it came to documentaries, knowledge was not only power, it was entertainment.
I remember when we got our first television set. It must have been 1957, around mid-year. And so I was around 5 years old, and I kept hearing all these adults talking about television. I had never seen it. And so the day arrived, we had this television set. And of course, you turned it on, and there was no reception, because if you lived in West Virginia, you lived down in the valleys, and you lived by the creeks, and that's how people, you know, define where you live. You live up Pigeon Creek or Mate Creek or Blackberry Creek. And so to get reception, you had to put an antenna on top of the nearest hill and run a coax cable down. And my mother's brother, Ralph, knew a lot about electronics and radio, and I remember him helping my father and my brother actually rig this cable that went up to the nearest hill, and there we got these first magical television images in. And for me, it had a profound effect. I was this curious kid, and anything that could bring in the outside world, whether it was reading, which is a great tool to bring in the outside world, or now this marvelous tool of television. And I often think now, back then, that was really the birth of the cable industry. The birth of the cable industry happened in the hills of Pennsylvania and West Virginia, because television reception was only possible because of cable. There would be a community antenna that everybody would hook into by cable. And so in the late 40s and 50s, that's where cable really had its birth. And there I was getting cable television early on, and little did I know that it would have kind of a profound impact on my career.
The natural beauty of West Virginia may have inspired William Robinson Lee's dream to paint America. His paintings of the American West displayed a virtuosity that made him one of the most beloved artists of all time and earned him the title of the Sagebrush Rembrandt. West Virginian Blanche Lazelle was a pioneer in the art world and one of the first U.S. women to work in abstract and cubist art. She has influenced a generation of American artists, including a contemporary West Virginia artist, Justina Hart. Another West Virginian who blazed a trail in the world of art and images was Francis Johnston. This self-portrait reveals the sly humor and inborn artistic talent that earned Johnston a gold medal at the 3rd International Photographic Congress in Paris, and a rewarding career as one of the nation's leading photojournalists. Creativity runs like an underground spring through West Virginia, a state that is home to many of our country's finest fictional writers. Pearl Buck was one of the first writers to emerge from this rugged landscape, but many others have followed.
And this wonderful thing is my grandmother's Joseph coat.
Mary Lee Settle, National Book Award winner, author of the Beulah Quintet, and founder of the Penn-Faulkner Award, believes that the influence of place and homeland on a writer's life is inestimable.
This is the picture that really staggered me. It's a picture of the first meeting of my parents. Here's my father looking at my mother. And that was their first meeting in a picnic at Kanawha Falls. And somebody took a picture. Look, they see nobody else. Isn't that wonderful? There's a part of us in West Virginia that when you leave, not the state, when you leave your county, you might as well go any place. My county is Kanawha County in the Kanawha River. I was born there. I spent a good time at Cedar Grove. For many years, I always had the yearning. If I'd get to Cedar Grove, everything would be all right. It's just there. Everybody has their river, don't they? And that's my river. You don't really leave. You have... The one thing you have to do, certainly as a writer, is leave. Because trying to write where all around you is what you're writing about is very difficult. You don't get the focus. But it's always there, in dreams.
Other West Virginia writers include John Knowles, author of the classic A Separate Peace, Stephen Kuntz, whose novels such as Flight of the Intruder consistently top the bestseller lists. Also Eugenia Price, with historical romance classics such as Savannah. Denise Jardina, author of The Unquiet Earth and Storming Heaven, and Pinckney Benedict, who wrote Dogs of God, have also earned critical praise for their novels. While poets Muriel Dressler, author of Appalachia, My Land, and Louise McNeill, author of Hill Daughter and other works, both found their inspiration in their home state. When Henry Louis Gates, Jr. wrote Colored People, his autobiographical tale about growing up in West Virginia, he revealed to the world the beauty of life in a small West Virginia town during the 50s.
I think I most remember the mountains, of course. I mean, everyone from West Virginia is mountain-oriented, mountain-fixated. And you don't realize how beautiful the mountains are until you go away for the first time, for a sustained period. And then coming back, you see these glorious mountains. And I think that as much as African-American culture has shaped who I am, being a West Virginian has shaped who I am, being a mountaineer, a certain rugged individualism, a certain appreciation of nature. I grew up hunting and fishing, right, in a culture where people hunted and fished and took fresh air for granted. I also remember, having been born in 1950, a nurturing sense of warmth that I experienced from growing up in a village, essentially. I mean, to me, West Virginia is a village. I mean, it's a little small city.
West Virginia has its share of television and theatrical entertainers. Performance artist and musician Ann Magnuson. Actors Conchata Ferrell, Peter Marshall, David Selby, Don Knotts, comic genius Soupy Sales, and of course yours truly, all West Virginians. Long known for its traditional music, West Virginia has a rich and diverse musical heritage, beginning with the famous blues singer Ada Bricktop Smith, Pulitzer Prize-winning classical music composer George Crumb, Metropolitan Opera stars Eleanor Steber and Phyllis Curtin. Other West Virginians practice their artistry in the world of country music: Harold Hawkshaw Hawkins, Red Sovine, and Charlie McCoy, and Country Music Hall of Fame member Little Jimmy Dickens. Grammy Award-winning country music singer Kathy Mattea believes that West Virginia is more than a place. It's a feeling that stays in her heart and her mind as she travels throughout the country.
It's an interesting thing, you know. I travel around the country and I meet a lot of people from West Virginia who've had to move for economic reasons. You know, the plant closes down or they get transferred, and I'll say, you know, where are you from? And they'll say West Virginia. And I'll say, oh, how long have you been gone? 25 years. But they still think of themselves as West Virginians, you know. It's just, it runs real deep. And most people that I've met that had to move away wish that there was a way they could move back, you know. A lot of times they get into a life and a job and they can't, you know, it's real hard to pick up their roots and go back. But people always in their heart carry that with them. And I feel like I'm the same way, you know. My family, my brothers, you know, live here. My mom and dad live here. My cousins, my aunts, my uncles. And it's, you know, sometimes I just need to come home. And I'm really glad to be home.
Strength is part of the mountain heritage. Strength of spirit, strength of character. And for many West Virginians, their physical power has earned national, and in many cases, international fame. Like Olympic gold medalists Randy Barnes, Ed Etzel, and Mary Lou Retton. West Virginia athletes who've achieved Hall of Fame status are Earl Greasy Neal, Frank Gatsky, Sam Huff, and George Marshall in football, Jesse Burkett in baseball, and in basketball, Claire B. and Jerry West. West, now executive vice president of the Los Angeles Lakers, reflects on the values he learned growing up in West Virginia.
Well, there's certainly West Virginia values. And again, you know, if that might offend some people, but I do think there's a little bit different value system back there. I don't really want to forget where I came from. That's real important to me. You know, I tried to tell my kids, you know, this is how I grew up, and this probably has provided the foundation for the person I am today.
Other West Virginians who have not forgotten their home state represent some of the most successful entrepreneurs in the country. These are business people who have gone beyond the accumulation of wealth to something even more significant, that of sharing it with the people and the state who have helped make it happen. Michael Benedum, known as the Great Wildcatter, created an oil empire that began in West Virginia and eventually circled the globe. Through the Claude Worthington Benedum Foundation, he left much of his personal fortune to his beloved home state, beginning a legacy of generosity that is carried on today. Lyle Clay sold his communications empire to establish the Charleston-based Clay Foundation, an organization that supports civic, state, and charitable projects. Lawson Hamilton, successful coal industrialist, civic leader, and benefactor to hundreds of charitable organizations, and James Buck Harless, who built a multinational lumber empire from a small West Virginia town called Gilbert.
I've always felt that if the community in which you live has been good to you financially, you are indebted. You should return at least a portion of that to the community. See, we had a mill in Ecuador and Guatemala and Brazil. We've operated in 11 states, different businesses, and I've never found any place that had any better or as good a workers as we have in West Virginia. I guess I'm just too prejudiced, but West Virginia to me is the most outstanding state in the Union, primarily because of its people.
In 1905, when Anna Jarvis commemorated the memory of her mother at a small West Virginia church, Mother's Day was born. But reaching out to neighbors and helping others has been a way of life in West Virginia, where a long history of humanitarianism has led us to the present day. In an Amish village, Albert Schweitzer Award winners and West Virginia natives, Holmes and Caroline Morton, have selflessly devoted their lives to finding and treating a rare genetically transmitted disease found in Amish children. While fellow West Virginian and Nobel Peace Prize nominee Wayne Smith has helped bring together people of different cultures through the international nonprofit organization, the Friendship Force.
So I say to you, have faith, young people. You can do anything. And don't let excuses hold you back. We have excuses because we were born poor.
And Leon Sullivan, born into poverty in an alley in Charleston, founded Opportunities Industrialization Centers, the world's largest self-help training program, which has so far trained more than 2 million Americans and thousands more throughout the world. Sullivan is also author of the Sullivan Principles, the blueprint for ending apartheid in South Africa, which he says are based upon the values he learned growing up in West Virginia.
When people throw things in your way, don't throw anything back at them. It's not going to help. Folks against you, not going to help. Just, trust in God. Shake the dust off your feet and step it.
I don't believe in just talking. I'm a pretty good preacher, a good preacher. But if all I did was to preach and make speeches, well, then my ministry is worthless to me. It's the following up the word into pragmatic terms. What you do actually, pragmatically, to help people and to make society better. And so I'm on fire inside with making my words come true, whether it be in OIC in Philadelphia or in Charleston or in Huntington or in Los Angeles or in Warsaw, Poland or in Johannesburg, South Africa. I believe it's not enough just to talk about freedom and justice and opportunity. I got to do something to make it reality. There's something in me that says if you say something should be done, try to do something about it. And if you start something, be sure you try to finish it. And that's what I've been doing, trying to finish it. I wanted to help West Virginia. I wanted to help the people who came from around that alley, people I went to school with, and the state that had helped me. I couldn't have done what perhaps I've done had I not been privileged to have a beginning and a start in West Virginia. Whereas the West Virginians always free and mountaineers always free. West Virginia made me free. So I'm a free man because I guess I learned it at West Virginia. West Virginians, mountaineers, always free. That's Leon Sullivan, and that's West Virginia.
More than a geographical or political entity, West Virginia is a spiritual home that stays forever in the hearts and minds of its people, who, from the beginnings of their lives, have heard the song that sings itself from the woodlands and the valleys, the meadows and the mountains, especially the mountains. For these are West Virginians, people who have been enriched by their state, who have taken what they needed from its soil and its soul, and who have given something back through their work or their art or their lives.